Hi, this is Mark. Welcome back to my channel. Today I'm going to talk about a subject that came up in one of the videos I did on Noelle Randall. I take a short break from YouTube and come back, and what do I find? All of the real estate seminar gurus have graduated, and they are all flooding YouTube with their crazy ideas. There are many concepts in real estate that look great on paper, they sound great on YouTube, and the seminar guru graduates are really out there pushing it. What they don't do is they don't tell you the pitfalls, they don't tell you that it's great on paper, doesn't work in the real life, and they also don't tell you the downside. All they tell you is the success case. What happens if everything goes perfectly? They never tell you the problems that might come up and what happens if things don't go right. So today I'm going to talk about subject to buying property subject to the existing mortgage. I'm going to go great detail and discuss the problems with that. If you enjoy my videos and you don't want to miss one, go ahead and hit the subscribe button. And as always, if you could help me out with that YouTube algorithm and smash the like button. On a previous video, someone said that I was delusional and got everything wrong, and that he had done a load of subject to deals. I thought I owed it to him to cover subject to in detail and respond to his 4 comments. I'm not 100% sure why Mr. Perryman needed to leave 4 comments, but I hope at least he watched the video 4 times, leaving a comment each time. If you did, Mr. Perryman, thank you for your support. First, let's cover what subject to is. When you purchase a piece of property, there are 2 components to it, to the purchase price. There's the existing loan, which may or may not exist, and then there's the seller's equity. In a traditional purchase, the buyer gets a new loan and brings in some down payment money. And those 2 sources of funds combine to pay off the seller's existing loan and to give them the money for their equity. The difference between what they owe on the property and the amount of their loan. In the olden days of real estate, back in the 60s, a buyer didn't necessarily need to get a new loan. What they could do is that they could give the seller some type of compensation, money, a note, a boat, anything like that, and then assume their loan. And assuming their loan means they would formally take over their loan, and the bank would acknowledge that the new buyer was on the loan and responsible for the loan. It was formal documentation with the lender that removed the seller from the loan and the buyer took their place on the loan. The lender was completely aware of this transaction and approved the buyer to come in and take over the loan. The buyer was responsible for the loan so that if they didn't make payments, the lender would foreclose on them and their credit would be ruined, not the sellers. The seller was completely out of the deal. This allowed buyers to get into certain properties with very minimal down, without getting a new loan, without qualifying for a new loan, and in some cases getting deep into the amortization on the existing loan, where more of every month's payment went to principal instead of interest. Also, the interest rates on the loans that they were assuming might be very attractive, lower than the interest rate on a loan they could currently get from a bank. It was this last part, the change in interest rate, that caused lenders to act. Why would a buyer go get a new loan at 10 or 12 or 14% when they can assume an existing one at 4 or 5 or 6%? They wouldn't. Additionally, the lender sometimes had no say over the buyer who was taking over the loan. They might not meet the lender's criteria in terms of creditworthiness, having a job, income, any of that. The lender's response was to implement a due on sale clause in any new mortgage that they created. The due on sale clause is also called an acceleration clause. It gives the lender the right to require that the loan be paid off in full if the property is transferred to any other person or entity. If the new buyer does not pay off the mortgage, the lender can begin foreclosure proceedings and take back the property from the buyer. So why would a lender ever accelerate a loan? As I've said, it's for the exact same reason that they came up with a due on sale clause in the first place. When interest rates rise, why would they want to accelerate a loan if it's at 10% when interest rates have fallen and they're at 2%? They wouldn't. They'd rather just keep collecting the 10% rather than require that to be paid off, because then they would have to loan it back out at 2%. That has been the situation for the past few years as interest rates have fallen. But that's changing now. Now it's the reverse. Why would a lender just let someone come in and take over a loan at 2.5% when interest rates are now above 6%? They wouldn't. They would prefer to have that 2% money back so they can loan it out to somebody else at 6%. That was the case in the 70s. It was not the case in the 2000s. It is the case now and will continue to be the case going forward. Interest rates are going up, and with the Fed raising interest rates repeatedly and no end in sight, there's also no reason to think that interest rates on mortgages will also not continue to go up. What happens if a lender accelerates the loan? At that point, the buyer is required to pay off the loan in full. What if they don't? Then the lender will begin foreclosure proceedings, and the foreclosure will go on the record of the seller, not the person who's subject to, because remember, they're not on the loan. The lender probably doesn't even know about them. If I were a seller and I sold to somebody subject to and they didn't make payments, and because they didn't make payments, I had a foreclosure on my record all of a sudden, on my credit report, I would immediately file a lawsuit. Immediately. If you plan to do subject twos, I would strongly recommend that you get a disclosure notice that is signed by the seller and notarized and created by a lawyer that says the seller knows that they are still on the hook for the mortgage, and if payments don't get made, it's their problem. Now let's take a look at Mr. Perryman's sample deal here. I have a few questions for Mr. Perryman. First, when and in what market did this deal take place? In the markets I look at, you're not buying very many properties at $100,000 and selling them at $160,000. Not now anytime. Many years ago, sure. He calls it a house, so I'm going to assume that it's not a condo or townhome or shed. Also, again, in the markets that I follow, properties don't sell in 6 months, they sell in 6 days. Also, in the markets I follow, 5,000 repairs will get you flooring replacement, new paint, and that's about it. Even if you do the work yourself, which as an investor, I don't really recommend that you do. So if you're purchasing a property for 62% of fair market value and all it needs is some cosmetic repairs, Very well done. That's an excellent deal. How many of those exist in your market? How many exist in any market? He says he's done a ton of those. Finally, his profit. He gets a profit of $55,000. He subtracts the purchase price and the existing mortgage and the repairs and comes up with $55,000. But did he leave out any details? Buying costs are minimal, so we'll give Mr. Perryman the benefit of the doubt there. What about selling costs? Did he sell it himself, so there's no real estate commission? Did he market it? How did he find the buyer? What about escrow costs? Did the buyer pay all of those? And how about holding costs? He held it for 6 months. Were there any utility bills? Did he have to pay property taxes during that 6 months? And what about the mortgage? He was supposed to pay the mortgage for 6 months, right? I may be delusional and I may be wrong about so many things, but details matter. And in this case, Mr. Perryman, I think we're missing a few details. I'm Mark, and that's what I think. Thanks for joining me again.